and welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and for the next hour we are going to be talking about fall. Yes, it's not even spring yet, technically it is. But we are looking forward to biking across Massachusetts. But first, I would like to welcome everyone for tuning in. If you have any questions for this evening, please feel free to give us a call at 781-270-9199. I never call, so I always forget the number. Or if you have a question, comment, or idea for a future topic that you'd like to see here on Something to Talk About, please feel free to email me at talk@bcattv.org. And as usual, I would like to thank my crew for this evening. We have Corey McNeil and Mike Duvall, who are both celebrating birthdays this week. So happy birthday, guys. Not on the same day, but around now. So happy birthday, and thank you guys. They are staff members here at BCAT, and without them, the place would probably fall apart. And I would also like to thank Colleen Moore and Brandy Sales, who are also volunteers here at BCAT, who have given up their Wednesday evening to help me out and try to make me look good. So thanks, guys. And one last thank you is to my husband, Paul, for staying home for Daddy Date Night with Gwyneth and Evan. And I hope everything went well, and hopefully Daddy didn't have to play Wii too long. And hope you kids go to bed and listen to Daddy, and I'll see you in the morning. And now, time to talk about biking. Thank you, Gary, for joining us. We have Gary Briere, who is the founder of...
True, yes. River's Edge
Cycling. I'm like, I want to look at your shirt because it's a really cool shirt, but I'm totally zoning. And your main activity, or your lead ride, is the Berkshires to Boston bike tour. Just recently opened registration.
That's correct.
And
it's a real pleasure to be here, Linda.
Yay.
Thanks so much for inviting me to be here to talk about the ride and to talk about River's Edge Cycling. It is so much fun. I know I drive my wife and my family crazy talking about some of the stuff. It does tend to get into your blood.
So that's why your kids moved out.
That's maybe why my children moved out, but they then do come back to help out with the ride, and that's very fun. So,
well, let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
And as I usually do on all of my shows, is just kind of get to know the guest a little bit. So where you grew up, where you went to school, how you got interested in cycling.
Sure. I'm Massachusetts born and bred. I grew up in Northampton with my family there, went to Northampton schools, and now actually live in the western part of the state still, out in the Connecticut Valley, in a little 1827 house on the banks of the Connecticut River that I absolutely adore. But biking has been really part of my life since I was just a little kid, much like it was much like it was for so many from our generation, because we were riding our bike to school, and we were riding our bike to see friends, and all of us.
And you didn't wear a helmet, and you
and
still
we didn't
lived to
wear
tell
helmets, and we survived all of that. Now I wear a helmet all the time. I wouldn't think about riding without it. But it is amazing how at that time bicycling was completely different. And so I grew up riding a variety of different bikes. And then when I was 16, one of my buddies, who was also 16, and I asked our parents if we could ride our bikes to Montreal from Northampton. And amazingly, our parents said
yes.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Wow.
And so we would laugh about that for years afterwards, talking with my parents about why on earth they would trust their 16-year-old to
drive to a foreign country.
It's
Canada, but
to ride their bike to a foreign country. And but we had a great time over about 2 weeks.
How far is that?
But it was about 600 miles each way, and it was just two 16-year-olds who really didn't know much about maps, but I think that was part of the
GPS
age
in that day.
The next year we rode to Cape Cod together. The year after that we did about 1,000 miles riding to Nova Scotia.
Wow.
And each year it was without any adults with us. It was just a couple of friends.
And when
going
you're
on a
young
bike
like
ride.
that, and before the internet, I mean, where did you know how far you could get in one day and where you could stay that day and
You know,
where you could get your bike fixed if something
yeah,
happened?
exactly. And those are the kind of lessons that you really learned along the way. I remember on our trip to Nova Scotia, one of my friends had a little bit of a wreck early on. We were only about 20 miles from home at the time, and we ended up having to figure out how to get the bike repaired, and it was just the sort of things that made you grow up pretty quickly and be creative and resourceful and resilient. And so I was very fortunate to have some parents that were either too crazy. It's not that they didn't love me. I know that's not the case. That really gave me the opportunity to do that. And so biking was part of my being from a pretty young age, and went through a number of years as my kids were growing up when I didn't do very much biking, and it wasn't until my children got old enough to start riding bikes that, and then particularly when my son got interested in mountain biking, that we began doing more riding together.
Now, do you do a lot of mountain biking, or are you
Still
more...
do a little mountain biking,
Okay.
but now I do more road biking. And in fact, for our 30th wedding anniversary, I got my wife I got us a tandem bicycle, and so now we do a lot of tandem riding, and we've got a couple of trips planned for this year as well.
Sweet.
So biking has continued to be part of my life from when I was a very young man, certainly up until now. And it's partly how I ended up getting into the biking business and
Okay.
creating the Berkshires to Boston tour.
Yeah, so how did you, I mean, what made you think Berkshires to Boston? How about, back up to Canada?
Well, it's a really good question. Somewhere I think we've got an image of what's called the Ragbri Ride, and it's an image of a lot of people riding across the state of Iowa.
Okay, what does
together.
Ragbri stand for? I'm guessing bike ride
It
across
is,
Iowa,
it
but
is the Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa, and the Register is the Des Moines Register, the large newspaper that
okay.
about 40 years ago, one of their staff wanted to do this ride across Iowa, and so I think there was, in fact, the image on the left is that.
Oh, wow.
And you can just see the crowd of people that are in there. That's the Register's annual Great Bike Ride across
It's like
Iowa.
the Boston Marathon on wheels.
It is,
But
we
longer.
like to say it's part marathon and part Mardi Gras. It is quite an event, about 18,000 riders. And,
Wow.
it's been going on for quite a few years.
How far is...
Well, you
Iowa?
begin by dipping your rear wheel of your bicycle in the Missouri River on the
Okay.
border with Nebraska, and then you dip your front wheel in the Mississippi River when you get to the other side. And it's usually somewhere in the vicinity of 450 to 500 miles across the state over 7 days, and it takes place in July, so it's 103 degrees every day, and there's corn everywhere, but the Iowa people are fantastic. The riders are fantastic. The event is wonderful, and you can really find anything you want in that kind of event. As I said, it's part Mardi Gras and part marathon. And
Okay, when I think Mardi Gras, I also think alcohol. And alcohol
well,
and biking
there is a little
so-
bit of that associated with the event. And
Okay,
there's
we won't talk
also
about that.
people who stop at every church across the way, and people who donate time and volunteer along the way. So you can really make that event whatever you want. Well, a friend of mine and I did that ride in 2008, and as we were doing that ride, Iowa was lovely, and the people were wonderful, and in every stop along the way, the cheerleaders were out, and the entire town center was closed down, and people were out selling all kinds of wonderful food and tons of pie. But it really occurred to me as a Massachusetts born and bred individual and a person who's been involved with our park system for years and tourism here in Massachusetts for years, that I really thought Massachusetts has a wonderful landscape to ride in. In fact, I dare say, as much as I love Iowa and I love many other places, I think we have the best landscape to ride in. And
well, Massachusetts does. Okay, I've been to Iowa once, but Massachusetts definitely seems to have a lot of character in the land.
Massachusetts has a wonderful character in it and just wonderful appeal, both as any kind of tourism destination, no matter what kind of transportation you're using. But for a cyclist, we really out Vermont. The western part of the state is fantastic, and your listeners will see, or viewers will see, some images as we go along of that. Just these wonderful rolling landscapes and quaint, quintessential villages. There's an image on the screen now of a couple of our riders in the area of Concord, and that image really demonstrates the way the Berkshires to Boston tour should be
look
done.
like they're on a road there. It looks kind of like
it
a
does look like
sidewalk
they're
or
riding through a
something.
field,
Yeah.
but it begins to suggest a little bit of the fall color that we see during the Berkshires to Boston tour, and that's actually a Sharon from Georgia who came all the way up from Georgia to be
Wow.
able to do the ride, as she demonstrates in that pose, it's kind of a very relaxed sort of ride. This is not a race. But those kind of images, I think, really evoke the kind of character and the conditions that we have here in Massachusetts for riding. And so after doing Briere, it became really clear to me that we really have wonderful cultural resources, wonderful natural resources here in the state of Massachusetts, and what better way to see them than at a sort of slow pace of a bicycle, because you really do notice so much more on a bicycle than you do sort of zipping by in a car. And so it convinced me that we needed to have a cross-state ride in Massachusetts. And I really thought, because Hub on Wheels is a event that takes place in downtown Boston, that the perfect combination would be to be able to experience all of the wonderful beauty of bicycling in Massachusetts and finish off that event with Hub on Wheels, which is a wonderful event with about 5,000 riders riding through the streets of Boston, including getting the opportunity to ride down Storrow Drive and do see a number of wonderful neighborhoods in the city. So it occurred to me that it was really that combination of experiences on a bicycle that would be very attractive to riders, and that would really be a wonderful way to celebrate Massachusetts and encourage green tourism. And in fact, the event takes place during what's called Car Free Week, as designated by the Department of Transportation, the DOT.
Is that coincidental, or did you plan it that
well,
way?
it sort of fits together.
Well,
They
it
do
does.
that during Hub on Wheels, and it just so happens that the week that leads up to Hub on Wheels is Car Free Week in Massachusetts. And so
I didn't know there was a Car Free Week.
there is a Car Free Week. You're going to need to leave the car at home during that week. So what better time to demonstrate that Massachusetts is a wonderful place to bike and encourage people to ride across the state, or really anywhere in the state, but during Car Free Week and finishing up with Hub on Wheels in Boston. So all of those things sort of came together in a way that just made perfect sense to develop and begin this ride.
Okay, Queen of Tangents. Couple of questions from that answer. You mentioned that there was a woman from Georgia who came up. Now, had she ever been to Massachusetts before? Do you find a lot of your riders just have never been to New England and why not check it out by bike?
That's a great question. A lot of our riders, the people who are interested in this ride really come from all over the world. And just the other day I was taking a look at the analytics on our website. We have thousands of people who visit the website every year. And actually thousands of people who visit it every month. I was noticing that there was people from Nelson Island, which is a little bit east of Australia, and then the other day some folks from Brisbane.
Now, did you have to look that up on a map? Because I've never heard of Nelson Island.
I did have to look that up. There's a couple of folks from Helsinki, Finland, that have been spending a fair amount of time on the website recently, and then a number from Brazil, and then of course all over the United States, from Florida to California, Portland, and a ton from New England. Lots and lots of people from New England are interested in the ride and have been spending some time on the website checking out the various pieces. The website is www.berkshirestoBoston.com, and it tells people all about the event. So
now, is it like broken down day one? You do this
we do that. So we give a little bit of an overview on the website, and then it talks about the different overnight communities, which are really very special. It talks about the route and what people are going to experience along the way, and how to register, and who all of our partners are, which are pretty diverse and extensive.
And we'll be going into a lot more detail of all of those things momentarily.
Exactly.
But I have my other tangent question. What happens if it rains?
You know, we were very fortunate in our first year
Hopefully
last
it won't.
year
I'm just,
that we did not have any rain until Sunday morning when we were in downtown Boston getting ready to go out and do Hub on Wheels. And every other day was just gorgeous September skies and just beautiful, clear riding days. So I am counting on the September weather fairies to make sure that always stays the same.
I'm not trying to jinx you or anything, but I'm like, okay, there have been known to be hurricanes in September in Massachusetts. So.
And we do, although we love to have great weather, we do have to plan for every kind of weather. And in fact, we advise our riders to plan for every kind of weather as well, and make sure that they're going to be prepared to ride. I have been on a number of rides myself where you had day after day of rain, and yet you had to get from one side of North Carolina to the other, and therefore you just needed to ride, or you needed to hop on the SAG vehicle, and which is never fun. You know, it's just, in my view,
well, it doesn't sound very fun.
It's a little cheating to be on the SAG vehicle, but
kind of like Boston Marathon taking the green line.
Kind of like that, yeah. It's there were a lot of elements to it, particularly planning for the weather and planning for any eventuality that you have to be prepared for.
Because like fall, just like spring, could be gorgeous, could be cold, could be it's New England, wait 5 minutes.
Yep, exactly. And so you really do need to plan for all of those things. We are fortunate that if you look at the statistics, that time of year is really quite nice. So we'll continue to hope that our statistics prove right, and we'll plan for when they prove wrong.
Okay, understood. Don't mean to jinx you or anything. So, a lot of roads in Massachusetts go from the west to the east, Mass Pike. I'm hoping you don't go on the Mass Turnpike.
We do avoid that.
Do you go Route 2, which is kind of scenic in itself, or how do you figure out where to go? Do you just...
that's a really good question, Linda. There is a bit of an art form to figuring out routes that are going to be the most appropriate for bicycles, because there's a number of different elements, and it's not always the straightest line. In fact, there's in many cases you end up taking various detours, either either to share a particularly nice viewpoint or a lovely community, but you're also looking for roads that have relatively low traffic, ideally that have a nice wide shoulder that riders can ride on. And in the western part of the state, we're especially blessed with lots of low volume roads, low traffic volume
So they're
roads.
kind of not major routes.
They're not major routes. And in fact, we've got 4 scenic byways. In fact, on the viewer's screen, they can see the scenic byway going up Mount Greylock, which is one of the
Is it the bottom
routes
right
that
one,
we
or?
take. No, that's on the left,
On the left.
actually.
Oh,
and that's
okay.
the tower at
Oh, okay, I
at
see
the
it.
top of Mount Greylock. And so the Mount Greylock Parkway is one of the scenic byways in Mass. The image of the signpost on the lower right is actually a location up in Ashfield, the corners of Bug Hill Road and Watson Spruce Corner Road. And you can sort of see there the scale of the roadways that we're involved with and the kind of architecture and scenery. As I said earlier, Massachusetts really out Vermont's Vermont when it comes to fantastic
Hope nobody
scenery.
from Vermont's watching.
Yeah. Well, Vermont's got some lovely roadways as well.
This is the Green Mountain State. Too many mountains up there.
Yeah, they do have a lot of mountains, and they do have a very strong cycling community as well, and lots of tourists that like to go there and ride. And many of our riders last year, and I'm sure we'll hear the same thing this year, are often surprised to see in a state that they think of as certainly very historic, but also think is a relatively populous state. They're surprised to see the little towns, the little villages, the quiet roads that we have really all across the state. And so when we're trying to lay out the route, we take great pains to try to find the places that are going to offer the right scale for a cyclist, that are going to offer the right kind of views, and that are also going to get us in a general direction of where we want to be at the end of the day. And we're fortunate in the western part of the state that our route actually takes advantage of 4 scenic byways: the Mount Greylock Scenic Byway, Route 116, a part of the Connecticut River Valley Scenic Byway, and then a part of what's called Route 122, which goes around the north side of Quabbin and has some fantastic
Quabbin's a
views
nice
out
area.
there.
Yeah.
Quabbin's a beautiful area. And it also, those scenic byways help us intersect with a number of different really lovely towns in Berry and Petersham and Wendell and Sunderland and all across the state. We've got some really fantastic communities that we're going through, and really fantastic businesses and people within those communities to work with.
Now, I'm also just, looking at the pictures that were there. It's like, okay, they are really rural, it's hard to say, not really popular roads. Do the riders kind of stay close enough to each other that you can follow the person in front of you? Is everybody given a map? I mean, is everybody supposed to be equipped with a GPS so they don't get lost? Or?
Those are really good questions. And in fact, I think you touched on a couple of the different ways that riders follow. Or that riders
So
find their
basically
way
it's up to
along the
them.
route. No, actually it's not. So we do go out ahead of the ride and we mark the entire route so that we have our
little breadcrumbs.
It's more than
not-
breadcrumbs. It's actually using a kind of spray chalk on the ground, and we spray at least every couple of miles, and then we really try to at each turn we put a lot of chalk markings.
Go this way.
Go this way, so that we're leading our folks in. But a lot of riders also download the information into their GPS unit, so which they have right on their bicycle, and they follow that. And then we also provide maps to folks, and in fact we're working with a graphic designer this year to do a whole booklet of maps that each day of the ride will be broken down into different maps that'll make it much easier for them to follow. So, and we find that some cyclists prefer their GPS, some prefer to follow other riders, some prefer to follow those markings on the ground, and some prefer to follow maps. And so we really try to provide them with all of those tools to avoid having anyone get lost unless they intend to get lost, which is also okay.
And every night you allow them to charge their cell phones.
And every night. It is interesting, the logistics that we need to provide for within the camp. You need to provide your shower trucks so that folks are going to be able to shower every night, and toilet facilities and hand washing facilities, and then you've got caterers and folks who are taking care of all the meals. You've got communities that you're working with at Hancock Shaker Village or in the town of Sunderland or Devons, and even in the city of Boston, where you're trying to coordinate all of these different necessities for your riders. And that does include making sure that they've got a place to be able to charge their laptop or their GPS or their iPhone or the other equipment that they're bringing with them. And that's a development within this kind of ride that we've seen over the last several years as all of us have become more and more dependent on technology for communication and photographs and knowing the time and getting where we want to go.
Speaking of photographs, who took all those photos?
We had a number of folks
riding, or was there like a designated photographer?
We had a designated photographer, a very talented photographer, Chin Bui, who actually works for Mass Bike, which is one of the organizations that we worked with. And Chin was out along the route making sure that we got some great photos, and so I use her work all the time.
Was she biking as well?
She was not biking.
Okay. So I'm like, that would be kind of hard, biking and not falling off and taking good pictures all at the same time.
Some people were able to do that, and there's a bunch of really wonderful shots that some of our riders shared with us. But usually they would have been, those shots were taken at various stops along the way. So we do have some lovely images and expect that we'll get even more images as we do the ride this year.
Okay, now when you were talking about determining the route and figuring out the most scenic ways, just kind of in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be doing a 5K next month. And in reading the description for that, they were very vigilant about making sure that it's exactly 5 kilometers. Are you as critical? Are you thinking of the distances, or do you just figure out the scenic way and say, okay, at the end of the day, at the end of mapping them out, this is how far we're going?
That's another great question. There's a bit of an art to that as well, because you want to make sure that at the end of the day, your riders are going to be in a place where they're going to be able to get meals, where there's going to be a hotel close enough for those riders who don't want to camp but would rather stay in a hotel. You don't want to have to shuttle them 20 miles away or 15 miles away. So you're looking for those communities that have just the right constellation of eating facilities, a camping location for us, hotel opportunities, and the right kind of character to give your riders the experience as they're going across the state. And so we're really very fortunate that at the beginning of the ride at Hancock Shaker Village, we've got this wonderful Shaker community, and we're camping among the historic structures there. The folks at Hancock Shaker Village are wonderful to work with, and we have a great beginning event there with a band and the Boxcar Lilies, who are fantastic, and they entertain our riders the first night. The second night, about 65 miles away, we stop in the town of Sunderland, which is not only my hometown, but
So
is
you go
also
home for the night.
and I can potentially go home for the night. But we've got wonderful restaurants in town. The community is fantastic to work with, and so we put our riders encampment right there at the ball fields in the center of town. The restaurants there in downtown are wonderful, and the community has this just really wonderful riverside charm in the Connecticut Valley. And then from there, we actually ride about 78 miles on Friday.
So is 70, you said
65
roughly
one day, 78 the
so,
second day, only about 50 the third day.
Oh, okay.
But we go from Sunderland, going through the central part of the state and above Quabbin Reservoir, and arrive in Devens, which is out near Leominster. And here again, we've got close proximity to hotels. The folks at the Devens Common Center have been fantastic to work with and allowed us to camp actually right in the common in the center of town.
Oh, cool.
And our riders can then go to a number of different restaurants that are available. We had a number of riders who, after that 78-mile day, they had planned to camp there, but when they saw the hotel directly across the street, they decided this is going to be a much better opportunity. And then we have the run from Devens into downtown Boston, which occurs on the Saturday of the ride. And there we actually stay at the Mass Parks Staridi Rink right in downtown Boston. It's an indoor rink. It allows our riders to be right at the edge of the north end on the banks of the Connecticut River, or the banks of the Charles River.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Wrong river. The banks of the Charles River. The USS Constitution is directly across the river, so they've got a view of that and access to historic Boston and the North End and all of the wonderful restaurants there. So we actually don't even attempt to feed them in downtown Boston that night because we know there are so many fantastic restaurants in town that that's a wonderful place for them to be able to be fed and really enjoy city life before on Sunday morning doing the Hub on Wheels, which is such a fabulous ride through the streets and neighborhoods of Boston.
I'm going to lose my notes for right now because stream of consciousness. Once again, we mentioned laptops and food and lodging overnight and camping. Do riders have to carry all of this stuff with them, or
that's a great
do they
question.
pack, is it like
and no, they don't.
pack a
part
suitcase?
Part of the tour is that we carry all of that luggage for them each day.
Okay.
So they arrive at the beginning, they set up their tent if they're camping with us, or go to the hotel if they're staying at one of the local hotels. And then each day they bring their luggage to our baggage truck. We load that in, we haul that to the next camp, and all they need to do is carry the things on their bike that they want to have with them that day. So might include their sunscreen and their camera and their phone and the various other
lots of water bottles,
little bit of tools and water bottle and a jacket.
Sounds like a lot to keep on a bike.
Well, a lot of folks who ride on an event like this will either carry a small backpack on their back, or they might have some kind of a handlebar bag or some other kind of bag, because you do want to be prepared for flat tires, and if you need to change a tire, or if you have some other sort of mechanical. We actually have SAG vehicles that are following our riders
does SAG
as well.
stand for something, or is it?
Well, it's support and gear, I think, is the official term. But our SAG vehicles are there to be able to help out if somebody has a mechanical problem. The drivers of the SAGs actually have some bike mechanic skills, and they can help get you back on the road. Or if you just discover that this is you're getting a little tired at this point and you want to get moved on to the next rest stop, that we can help do that as well. So
now, in
each
an
day,
event like that, if they decide that they can't continue for whatever reason, is there room enough for the bike on the vehicle?
there is, yeah. So we can carry both the bike and the rider and move them on to a
And
next.
all the stuff.
And certainly all of their equipment has already moved forward in, with our baggage truck to be able to go to the next stop. So we've got multiple vehicles that are supporting our riders along the way.
Now, is there like a formula as to how many vehicles you need per number of riders?
For this event with a couple hundred riders, we've got several vehicles available for folks, and there are certain places where you suspect that if there's going to be a problem, so you're knowledgeable about the route and what's going to be the most challenging. You're knowledgeable about where each of your rest stops are, and that's often a place where people will get to the rest stop, and that will be where they'll let you know, I'm not sure I can make it further or whatever. So, there's, I think you just need to sort of know your riders, know the challenges of the route, and the kind of situations that might come up that you're going to need to support them with.
Oh, okay. Now, we mentioned, or the website mentioned like an optional ride to Mount Greylock.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit more about
Sure.
that? Like what made you decide to do it?
Yeah. Well, Mount Greylock is the highest peak in Massachusetts at 3,491 feet. The Department of Conservation and Recreation, Mass Parks, recently rebuilt that entire roadway. It is a completely fantastic ride.
So it's not like a mountain bike portion of...
No,
okay.
it is not a mountain bike ride. It is a road bike ride, and it is such a iconic bicycle ride in an iconic mountain in Massachusetts that it really seemed like adding that as a pre-tour activity made a lot of sense. So this year we'll be offering that ride. Will take place on Wednesday as people are gathering in Hancock Shaker Village to be able to do the ride, which begins across the state on Thursday. So it gives folks an additional activity and really kind of a fun adventure for them. It's they climb about 4,000 feet that day. It's
Straight up. No.
Well, it is a pretty significant climb, but I know a lot of people will really enjoy that part of the ride.
Now, is that like, well, we do have an image, so while they're looking for that image, I'm just wondering, is that the steepest part of the ride if someone were to choose it, or are there other areas of Massachusetts that have that
It's
steep of a grade?
that would be overall the biggest climb, but there are other ascents along the way that are in fact a little bit steeper, but they're shorter.
Because I'm not a big fan of hills, so
Yeah.
Going up 4,000 feet would not be my idea of fun.
There are a number of pieces that, for example, the climb out of the Connecticut Valley and beginning to head up into the hills is about an 11-mile climb, but it's a gentle up and down, but over the course of 11 miles you...
Gentle and up to me just...
Yeah. So I think one person once described the profile of the route as looking a little bit like an EKG monitor, but in fact we found the folks who did the ride with us last year felt that the route was really wonderful, that the climbs were not too difficult, and in fact this year we've already heard from a couple of families with relatively young children that they're interested in doing the ride as well. And in fact, the ideal rider for this event, the folks that we really try to cater to are folks for whom this would be a bit of a challenge. This is taking place in September, and we really like to see people use the Berkshires to Boston tour as a setting a goal for themselves of coming all the way across the state, and therefore doing some training over the course of the spring and summer to be able to prepare for that kind of ride. In fact, the lengths of day or the lengths of each segment are really not that bad, between 65 and 75 miles. There's some cycling events where people are riding 200 miles in 24 hours, but they are enough that for many riders they are stretching themselves, and that's exactly what we like to see, because I think it really encourages them to recognize that they can ride more and experience more on a bicycle.
Okay. Now, back about some of the camping and everything, I'm not sure if we had the image about, where riders stay. You said some of them camp out, some of them stay in the local hotel, which would be me. What do they do when they're not riding? I mean, do they just hang out in their hotel room or hang out at the campsite? You said, there's entertainment the first night at the beginning of the tour, but is there entertainment each night? How does that work?
We actually do entertainment in Sunderland as well, and we'll have another group there that evening. We did find that we like to sort of give provide the opportunity for our riders really to mingle without necessarily programming it too much. And so I think the night in Devon's this year will have it a little bit more of a free-for-all at that point. And then the night in Boston, there's so much to do in the city of Boston that I think we're really letting them go out and explore that
You're on your
evening.
own, have fun.
And what we really try to encourage is the interaction between riders throughout the event. They get a lot of that while they're riding together. You always end up finding someone who's got about the same pace and same cadence as you do, no matter what that pace is.
Yeah, I'd be right in front of the SAG vehicle at the end. Go.
And so you meet people that way, but I think the evenings are really an important opportunity to meet people too. We also like to give them opportunities to spend time in the various communities, and because it is a bit about economic development in Massachusetts as well. The sign that we have here next to us, and actually the sign that you see in the window on the image to the left.
Cool. Now that's an ice cream.
And that's quite an ice cream at Kimball's Ice Cream in Lancaster. We go right by Kimball's, and they're a great partner to work with. And they are just one of the businesses that we put these signs in the window that welcome our riders. And we let our riders know that there are businesses across Massachusetts that are excited to see them coming through.
Rider-friendly.
That are rider-friendly. They're excited to see them come through and really welcome their business. I firmly believe that bicycling means business. It means business, economic development for our little communities across Massachusetts. And it's a wonderful way to link bicycle transportation to communities and help them to recognize it as an opportunity for expanding their sales and expanding their opportunities. So we really try to make that connection very much. The town of Berkshires is a great example. Actually, the image on the screen now is Elmer's store, which was a very popular stop in Ashfield as folks went through. And actually, you talk about dinner. The image on the left there is our buffet dinner at Hancock Shaker Village on the first night.
And that's all catered and everything?
It's all catered, and so each night we have really wonderful, fantastic food for our riders, because you burn through a lot of fuel while you're
What do you do
riding.
for lunch? Because everybody's
Lunch is on your own, and
So stop
we do
wherever you
that
want along the way?
purposely with signs like this, encouraging folks to get off their bikes, stop into one of these little stores like Elmer's, or little stores around the Berry Common or in Princeton or a variety of other communities, and visit those local businesses and drop a few dollars there to grab lunch. So we purposely don't provide that because we really want our riders to be visiting those small businesses.
Okay. An extension of working with the businesses, how do you find out which businesses would be willing, which businesses would be in a location where the riders would be likely to stop for, like, lunch? You're not, if they're going to get there at 9 a.m., you're really not going to want to promote lunch at that time.
Yeah.
And is there like a sponsorship for the business for putting their sign in and welcoming them, like their name gets on a T-shirt, or is it just, hey, we're willing to give you customers?
Yeah. It is more, hey, we're willing to give you customers. It's a very established route. This is the route that we will really use each year.
Okay.
And the idea is that we begin to grow the connection between our riders and those communities, so that each year they'll see a bit more business and a bit more business.
Okay.
And that's really been an intriguing and exciting aspect for our business communities and some of the small towns along the way, that they're really thrilled to see this event coming through and look forward to watching it grow over time. So in terms of which businesses are kind of experience the
Do you drive the route and say, okay, about this
yeah,
time?
exactly. Because we're driving the route anyways in our planning, and we drive it to be able to market. And at that point, we're dropping off these posters at each business along the way that a cyclist might be interested in stopping in. So whether it's a gift shop, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a general store, some place that a cyclist might find some of their interests and needs met. And cyclists are just like any other kind of tourist. They've got a broad array of interests. Some of them are stopping in antique stores, others are stopping in different types of shops. And we've just got such wonderful communities and gorgeous little communities along the route. And of course, you've got to stop at Kimball's to grab some of that ice cream.
Is that like the city of Kimball's where they have the bumper boats?
No, it's not that one.
Oh,
it's
okay.
actually out in Lancaster, which is a little bit to the east of Leominster.
Yeah, because that one's in Westford that I'm thinking of. Okay.
And they've got a wonderful shop there with lots of different items and, of course, fantastic ice cream. So they're a great partner to work with, and they put up our signs and encourage our riders to come through on that Friday as they're
So for the most part, the businesses have been really open to,
Absolutely.
Sure, we'll put your sign up. And I was wondering why it was like that electric yellow, but probably like you want it to be noticed and not mixed in.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, we show this sign to our riders when we're gathering in the western part of the state on the first day, and we tell them to keep an eye out for this this sign, and that they'll be seeing it all across the Commonwealth.
Neat. Now you can use the same sign every year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the same route every year.
And the same route every year, because it really is, the goal is to get from one side of the state to the other, to do it in just a couple of days. And as I mentioned, at this point we've got a 65-mile day, a 78-mile day, and about a 50-mile day doing that, and exposes our riders to some of the most wonderful communities in Massachusetts. It's very bikeable roads. And so if you try to provide too many different routes to do that, it would be wonderful to touch some different communities, but you do have certain limitations in terms of the scale of the road, the traffic volumes on the roads, and
it's a lot of work. You don't want to have to redo it every
the services
Why
and
reinvent
needs
the
that
wheel?
your riders need. So we feel there's a lot of advantages. The route is only one of the elements of what makes a ride like this, because really the weather, the riders that you meet, and the experiences that you have along the way, all are very distinctive elements of any bike tour.
Okay. Now we talked about, getting permission from businesses to put the sign in, and we also talked about camping and being on the different roads. What kind of permissions do you need? Do you need to contact like local police departments saying, hey, we're going to be coming through and riding on these roads and camping, how do you go about that?
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We begin notifying the communities along our route, and there's about 35 of them between one end of the state and the other, and we begin notifying the fire and police departments, the Department of Public Works. We notified the select boards, especially for those towns where we're going to have either a lunch stop or and certainly an overnight stop. So we really try to work with the communities and let all of the different public officials there that might play a role or might have some insights about what'll make the event go better or less better. And so, for example, we worked with the Department of Transportation, the State Department of Transportation, in an area in the western part of the state to make sure that there wasn't a paving project taking place along our route just at the time that we were going in. And the select boards and police departments and fire departments especially are just fantastic to work with. We have rest stops in 3 different fire stations along the way, and the chiefs and the crews in those fire departments could not be more generous, opening up bays so that our folks can get in out of the sun, because there's always sun in September.
Of course.
And providing water, and so we then try to make a nice donation to each one of those departments at the end of the tour. So the communities could not be better. They are absolutely fabulous to work with.
Okay, we are running close to being out of time, so I want to get a couple of the really important questions. How would someone register for this if they wanted to
the best way to do it, and if you want to learn more, is go to the website, www.berkshirestoBoston.com, and there you'll actually see there's a registration page that just click on Register Now. And
is there like a cost to register?
There is a small registration fee for that goes to the registration company called Sign Me Up. And then the price for the tour, it's $358 for the registration cost for new riders, and then that includes your meal on Thursday night, as well as all of the support systems, the SAG vehicles and luggage movement and marked routes and all of the safety elements that we do. And then there's a $90 meal plan that provides you 4 breakfasts and 2 additional dinners along the way.
Okay.
So for about $450, $440, you can get all of that covered. It doesn't require any fundraising. Some of the, about 10% of the proceeds go to bicycle advocacy organizations in Massachusetts that are helping to make bicycling better in the state of Massachusetts. So your investment in the tour not only gives you Hub on Wheels and the ride across the state and all of these wonderful meals and riding camaraderie, but it also helps support better bicycling in the state of Massachusetts.
How would you advise somebody to start training for this? Because you mentioned that this ride is designed to be kind of not really beginner, but more novice related. So how would you start to train, and how long? And
you know, the real key is to spend a fair amount of time on a bike. And here in New England, we've got lots of different hills to try out. We do have riders who come from all over the world, and some places the only rise in the landscape is where it goes over a highway somewhere, and so they need to train in some other ways. But it's really about getting some miles in on your bike, and ideally doing a couple of days where you're riding your bike one day after the other, because you can do that once a week ride and even do 75 or 80 miles, but when you have to do 70
3 days in a
miles
row.
a couple days in a row, you can find that can cause some problems. So we encourage riders to just get a lot of time in the saddle over the course of the spring and summer, and make sure that you're able to ride 75 or 80 miles without having too much difficulty, and then the next day be able to get back on your bike and ride 40 or 50 miles. And if someone who can do that by the latter part of summer, they wouldn't have any trouble doing this ride.
Just listening to you explain that, if someone were to ride 75 or 80 miles, I'm thinking, okay, I could probably drive from Burlington to go visit my parents in Western Mass, but I don't want to go on the turnpike. I'm not allowed on the turnpike. How do you just ride?
Well, depending on where you are, and there's lots of
80
different
miles
routes.
is pretty far.
80 miles is pretty far, and you want to make sure as you're going out and doing that training that you end up, when you do your 80 miles or your 75 miles, that you're back where you started. So it does require planning out your route. Okay. And there are a number of different websites and places out there where you can get ideas about rides in whatever community you live in, anywhere in the nation. A website like Ride with GPS is a good one. You can go to that website and just put in whatever community you live in, and it'll identify different rides that people have done near there. Ride New England or Bike New England actually has lots of different routes that they their members, that their participants have put out. So no matter where you are, you can find different places that you can ride that are nearby, and that you'll be able to get a nice kind of training route in.
Okay, one last question. What do you see as the future of both the Berkshires to Boston Bicycle Tour and River's Edge Cycling, and how do those two mesh?
Those two, Berkshires to Boston, will be part of River's Edge forever, and now it is such a wonderful event. We're really looking forward to offering that to folks for years. We do see that event growing over time. We are purposely growing at a modest pace. Right now, we're going to limit this year to about 200, but down the road, it'll be interesting to see how many riders we can fit in the various venues, and how many participants our communities and our route is comfortable with. So we're going to manage that growth. River's Edge Cycling will be introducing a number of additional rides in the next few years. The Steeples and Streams Tour will be that'll be a ride across western New England from Connecticut to up through Vermont and across Massachusetts. And then the River Valley Tandem Rally will be an event that is designed for tandem riders.
I knew you'd have something
there you
planned
go, something
for that
tandems, and that'll be taking place in the Connecticut River Valley, and probably be in the spring time
Okay,
horizon.
because I was going to ask if they were all going to be fall or spring.
No, we'll try to do different things. There's so much work associated with any one of these events that you want to spread them out a little bit just to make your life reasonable.
All right, well, we are just about out of time. Thank you so much for coming.
It's been a pleasure being here.
And
thanks so much.
Hopefully you'll have lots of riders and you'll reach that 200. Now, can people register up to September?
They can register up until registration will officially close in the middle part of August.
Okay.
But if we fill up before that, then it'll just
Wait
close
list.
Whenever. There will be a wait list.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody for joining me this evening. Hopefully you have that motivation to get out and bicycle and ride everywhere and help the environment and help yourself. So have a pleasant evening. Thank you for joining us, and have a great week. Good night.